What's up everyone, Mark Croson here, and today we're going to be going over the most common mistakes I see within the start, and we're going to start the video right now. Alright, so this is going to be an important video just because I think there's a lot of different things that people do when they are going through like the first beginning start phase, right? Those first like 3 to 5 steps that will really end up costing you a lot of time when it comes to your overall sprint. And a lot of times, by the way, is 2 to 3 tenths of a second, right? Because if we're talking, top speed, the difference between running a 4.8 and a 4.5 is a lot of time, right? The difference between running 11.2 and a 10.8 is a lot of times, right? 4 tenths of a second. You could easily shed that in your first 3 to 5 yards, 3 to 5 steps by being very, very efficient with this movement pattern. So I want to go into what are some of the mistakes that we see within the start that ends up really, making a difference as you're going through that start phase and then going into the drive phase. So first thing that I see is people just going and really, I call it lifting the chin, just because when you go and you stand up and lift that chin too early, right? So you can see how really as he's coming through here, he's trying to stay down, but that chin gets separated and really gets lifted up. He didn't do a terrible job out of it. I've seen it a lot worse, but this is not a great example of keeping your chin down, right? That ends up being the big thing. When you're going through your first 3 to 5 steps, you do want to keep that chin down, right? He did a good job, and the reason I like this one is because he did do a good job of getting his spine through, right? I see a lot of guys that will end up keeping their chin down, which is good, but then also almost keeping their spine too far down, which really creates this roundedness in the back. And, there's some top sprinters that are able to do that effectively, but I think from a broader perspective, I do think that the right way to do this is to maintain a more neutral spine position rather than being rounded in the back. And that's the thing that I want to talk about too, is like, I look at so many of these videos of people sprinting and, there's nobody that does a perfect start, right? Everybody, even, Usain Bolt, there's things that he could work on. Tyson Gay, there's things, Christian Coleman. I mean, Christian Coleman doesn't make too many mistakes, but, he kind of has not a great second step as he's going through. So, point being is, there's so many things that go into being able to do this effectively as possible that, going in and really working on the small particular parts of your sprinting style can end up making a big difference in your overall time. And it's not about being able to do this perfectly. It's just about being able to understand how you can get better, right? And so if you're not on a constant pursuit of improvement, then you're really not going to see the same degree of overall development within your running. So here we have an example of trying to stay down too much and really allowing the feet to get too flat, right? This is going to be the second thing, is flat feet. When you're first starting, you got to be on the balls of your feet. You got to have your weight shifting forward, okay? And that ends up being super important here, is that if you start to get too flat with the feet too early on, it makes it so that foot contact time is way too long. It makes it so it takes a long time for you to transition off your feet, and that really adds more time into your overall sprinting. And then usually, how you start is how you finish, right? So when you go and you start like this and you have, a way too much time spent on the ground per each one of your steps, and when you get to your top end speed, you're still in that same predicament where you're just spending too much time on the ground on each step. So that's the second thing, too flat-footed. The next one's going to be going too far kind of straight back with the arms, right? Instead of being able to drive the arms upwards. And here real quick, I'm just going to compare it here to myself. And not that I have the greatest start in the world, but you can see the difference between when I'm starting here and being able to really pull those arms back, right? Getting a big solid pull, okay? In comparison to when you're not getting a big solid pull, right? And he started in more of a 3-point stance position, but still it's no excuse to not get your hands further back. You can see he's running with those arms so straight, even as he's going through. So you can see, for me, I end up straightening my arms out a lot at the end, but and they're still a little bit bent, there, and I can do a better job of keeping my hands inwards, right? I would say that'd be one of my mistakes, but you can see the difference in where my shoulder extension is, and you end up getting a lot out of your shoulder extension, right? Your arm extension positioning ends up mattering a lot. So when you just get this really straight arm and you don't get that elbow lift, that it impacts how much force you're going to be generating out of the ground. Okay, so that's another important thing, is where are your arms going? Are your arms going back or back and up? And up. You want to be going back and up, not just straight back, because that'll be limiting what you're doing within the extension within your shoulder, which is an important part of being able to build speed, especially at the beginning. But, you know, really all the way through, you have to be getting great extension out of the shoulder. But definitely at the beginning, you have to, you know, be doing really good with that. I'm going to quickly interrupt this video just to say if you like the information, go and click that thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, and we'll hop right back into it. All right, this one's just going to be an ineffective push-off, right? So, you know, this is not really too much of a start phase, but it still ends up being a position that you see. I mean, he's just starting off, so it is kind of technically a start phase, but he didn't come out of like the blocks. But point being, you know, when you're pushing off here, it's not bad to get this knee action and foot action, right? And I like this example because you can see the position where the foot is outside of the knee. I think that's not a bad position to be in, but when you're doing this, you have to be getting massive amounts of hip flexion, right? So you have to be driving that knee forward very, very quickly. A lot of the top guys have this type of action in their backside mechanics when they're first starting, but they're going through and they're driving their knee through really quickly. And what's happening here is it's just an ineffective push off. So as he's pushing off, he's really letting that foot get out to the side, right? And you can see the foot's getting out to the side, but the knee's not going anywhere, right? So he's not getting hip flexion. He's just getting what's called internal rotation of the hip, okay? And again, that internal rotation isn't the problem here. It's the lack of hip drive with, or knee drive with, that internal rotation. So it's important to be able to get the knees to come through as you're doing this when you're first starting, to really make it so then when you're hitting the ground, you're hitting the ground a little bit more at that angle, which will help you in being able to get really quickly your force into the ground and then right back off, right? Because if you're landing on like the outside part of your foot, then you have to transition from your weight on the outside of your foot to the inside and then push off. Or if you land more on the inside part of the foot already, then you could land and then immediately propulse yourself right back off, which I think is the most effective way to run. All right, here's the example of really just getting the hands too far away, right? So you can see how far out to the side the hands are getting here. That's gonna be something that you wanna work on. You don't wanna allow your hands to get too wide, because then you can see now the hands coming across, right? And now because the hands coming across, watch where that foot lands, right? So now the foot's landing way out to the side here. Okay, and it's not bad that, you know, where he's landing on the foot, right? He's still on the inside part of the foot, which is good, but because he's so externally rotated here, he's just not going to be able to get very much power off of that step, right? And he's going to take a little bit longer time there as he's pushing off. Okay, so this step's better. See where he's landing here? That's where you want to be landing in comparison to with that foot all the way turned out. Right? So that ends up being a really, really common thing that I see here, guys, is people landing with their feet too far or with their weight too far on the outside part of their foot, or their foot too much externally rotated because they're not controlling their arms. So really look at that with your own sprinting mechanics, because I see that as such a big problem in so many sprinters out there. And the last one has to do with the knee drive, right? So this is an example of somebody who's, as they're coming through with their legs, I talked about how, you know, you want to almost be coming inside with the knee and, you know, really not thinking too much about the foot as you're coming through. It's really more of driving the knee through, but your foot kind of naturally ends up going a little bit more outside. Here we can see somebody who's keeping the knee more outside and the foot more on the inside, right? So as he's going through, he, again, ends up landing more on the outside part of the foot, not because as much of the arm swing, right? He does have a big sway that he has going on within the spine, so he's lacking some spine control, but really because of how he's driving through with his legs, right? His knees outside, foot inside, so he's really not getting any degree of action where he's getting like a lateral pull or an outside pull into the ground. So now he's landing so far on the outside part of his feet on each one of these steps. And you just don't get as much of a push when you're going off the outside part of your foot. Right? If you go in and you think about trying to do a vertical jump off of the outside part of your feet in comparison to doing a vertical jump off of like your toes and the inside part of your feet, then you could really feel the difference between which one is going to help you out the most. Or even a broad jump, right? If you try to push off more on the outside part of your foot on a broad jump in comparison to the inside part of your foot on a broad jump, you'll feel the difference between how that's going to impact you. And how you land here, you know, he's probably transitioning his weight, but you can see because he's landing on the outside part of his foot, his ankle immediately collapses in, which is another way of bleeding out force, right? Because now your body has to spend more time controlling the ankle, controlling the body, controlling the knee than it is in generating force. If you land with a very, very stable position, right? A lot of these best guys, the best guys in the world, are able to get very, very far forward, right? Like basically right underneath their toes, and they land, and when they land, their ankles are locked in, their knees, everything's locked in, so then they don't have to spend very much time on the ground, and they're creating massive amounts of force as they're pushing off, which is why when you watch them go, it's almost like they're shooting out of a cannon because of how efficient they are with that time spent on the ground. Where here, you could see the amount of force that's just getting bled out because of the lack of ankle stabilization and foot stabilization that is created because of how much reliance there is on external rotation. So he's doing way too many squats in the gym, right? And doing them with not great form instead of doing broad jumps, or even, deadlifts could be an effective thing, or even just stabilizing the ankle, more balanced stuff, single leg RDLs. Those would be critical to add into his program in order to improve his start. So that's going to be the 6 things that I think are the biggest mistakes that I see from the start. I'm going to quickly go over them again. One is not bringing your hands straight back and up when you're starting out, right? Instead, just going almost straight back. So you want to be able to go up and back when you're going out. Also lifting up the chin too early, right? And really losing a great spine position because you lift up with the chin. Landing too flat-footed as you're starting, right? So you want to be heels up as high as you can, really landing more on with your weight on closer to your toes, kind of ball of your foot type of positioning, not on the middle part of your foot, and your heel really shouldn't even be touching the ground, especially in those first 3 to 5 steps. An ineffective push-off, which just means that when you're pushing off, you're really not driving that knee through, creating great hip flexion. Instead, you're really allowing that foot to get stuck back behind you. So now as you transition, you're not able to really generate any force into the ground because your feet are stuck way back behind you and your hip's not in a great position to be able to really generate a lot of force. So just being able to improve your push-off, so you're going and really pushing off the balls of your feet and into your big toe. Really, the big toe is the last thing that's going to be touching the ground. So really pushing off from that angle and making it so you're pushing off in a way where you could drive that knee forward and through immediately instead of having it go into any degree of rotation before it's able to come through. The next one is losing control of the arms. So when your arms go too far out to the side or hands go too far out to the side, now you're going to end up landing with your feet, more of your weight on the outside part of your feet. You're going to probably spend more time on the ground. And, that's a common thing that I see. And there are people that have success with, allowing their hands to get out to the side, but they're able to still stabilize and control it when their foot lands. So, it's okay to have some degree of lateral movement that's going on within your spine and within your arms. I'm not saying that that's an impossible thing to win with or run fast with, but if you're allowing it too much, right, you can have too much side-to-side movement that could be making it so now you're landing with just your weight way too far out to the side, and it ends up costing you precious seconds when it comes to pushing off. And then the last one just going to be when you're starting off, allowing those knees to go too far out to the side, right? And this is something that I don't think very many people talk about, which is that as you're coming through, you almost want to have a slight degree of adduction within the hip. So abduction is when the feet are spreading apart, where adduction are when the knees are coming together or legs are coming together. So you want to be having that adduction. So not only is it hip flexion or driving the knee straight through, it's also a slight amount of adduction, which means the knees coming across. But when you get too stuck in external rotation, doing too many squats with like large amounts of external rotation within the legs, now your feet will end up wide like this. And then when you're landing, again, you're landing too much on the outside part of your foot. And that, really is the most common problem, but there's so many things that go into why that's happening that I wanted to be able to differentiate that, right? You don't want to be landing on the outside part of your foot when you're going through your start. You've got to be landing on like your big toe, ball of your foot. Those are like the 2 main positions. You don't want to be too far on the outside, because when you land on the outside, now you really cause yourself a large degree of possibility of instability, right? And so that just means that when you're landing, your ankles are going to be shaking. They're going to be moving too much. And if you end up having a large degree of movement happening when your foot's landing, that's going to increase the amount of time spent on the ground, and it's going to make it so the force ends up not being as productive. When you see those top sprinters go, they really have a lot of just straight force into the ground, so they're very stable when their foot's hitting the ground. There's not a very much additional movement going on, which makes it so they're able to immediately push right back off. And again, makes it so it looks looks like they're like shooting off like a cannon. So those are going to be the 6 most important things to improve your start. As always, thanks for watching. If you like the information, go ahead and click that thumbs up down below. Subscribe to the channel. If you have any questions, comments, or recommendations, you can leave those down below. And I'm going to keep on talking about this 28-day free speed program. I think it's going to be a great thing for anybody that's interested in getting improvement within their speed, right? It's going to be a 28-day commitment, right? So if you have 28 days that you can commit to improving your speed, that is the #1 thing you got to have here, okay? I think more people do not have success in their speed because they do not commit 28 days to their improvement, which is why they end up taking steps backwards or staying the same. Right? When it comes to making improvement, you have to be doing something on a consistent basis. If it's worth doing, then it's worth doing all the time. I always say that, and that's why I really like doing, some of these speed drills. So just being able to maximize your time, right? And make it so the time that you utilize, and I think this 28-day program will do that for you. So again, thanks for watching. If you're still watching right now and haven't clicked that like button or subscribe button, go ahead and do that right now. We really appreciate it, and we'll talk to you soon.